All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Who's Next. I'm your host, Joe McGeal, here on the Micro Effect Radio Broadcast Network, and it is Wednesday, June the 8th, 2015, and we are approaching 100 degrees out here in the great state of Idaho, so things are warming up pretty good. And I have a guest on with me here today. I'm going to be talking about some things that I haven't talked about in a very long time. Everybody's been focusing on, the things that Obama's been doing and all the false flag operations, people dying everywhere, those kind of things. But I don't think we're paying much attention to some of the things. Or did I say June? Okay, maybe it might be the 8th of July if I said June. I don't remember. But with all the things that we have going on in the country, people are not so much prone to pay attention to some of the other aspects of life that we have going on because they're being razzled and dazzled with all these governmental problems, shall we say. And so today I've invited Nancy Leader, who has a website, zetatalk.com. Nancy used to be on with us here at the Micro Effect, but life moves on, and we have to tend to things. I'm not sure if it was back there. Nancy was dealing with some health problems, as I remember, but she's certainly with us today. And Nancy, if you could respond here, I can tell if I have you on the board or not.
Yeah. Hello. Testing.
Okay,
One,
there
two,
you go.
three. Yeah. I was on the Micro Effect 2007 to 2010.
Right.
And it got to be a little much for me I found myself repeating myself rather than generating new material. So, yes, well, I'm taking a handful of different herbal meds, and boy, do they work. So I'm in pretty good shape these days, but still I limit, what I get. I'm in my 70s, mid 70s, and I have what they call the metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high blood cholesterol. And then you take a handful of pharma pills, and then you got all these side effects. And then I take a handful of herbal meds, and they counter the side effects and do their own thing anyway. So I think I'm making it okay. Hope the same for you, Joe.
Well, I kind of feel in a lot of ways like you do, just repeating yourself over and over.
Yeah.
It's like I was told in commercialism that a individual had to hear the commercial run, I don't know, some 32 or 4 times or something before it actually rings the bell. So, and I feel, and I'm sure you feel, pretty confident that you've brought a lot of the messages at least 30 times to the board. And, you hope people are getting it. But, today, it's been a long time since you and I have chatted, and especially on the air, about some of the things that are going on outside of what all the atrocities that the government is involved in, and that people aren't necessarily paying attention to. Now, one of the things that I'm aware of, in Nibiru, the Planet X, or whatever they want to call it, was an exciting thing here a few years ago. Everybody was talking about it, but we don't hear too much about it today. And I know that you've been keeping up on current events, things that are taking place, what we possibly might be seeing in the future, and also what's already being seen in other parts of the world, what people can see and what we can't hear, say, from the United States. So if it's okay with you, Nancy, let's start off with what's going on with Planet X, what's going on there. I know that's something you watch very carefully, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 20 years ago in 1995, Zeta Talk started out on the web. And one of the first things that the Zetas, who, by the way, are aliens from Zeta Reticuli, benign, not the bad sort. And I'm in telepathic contact with them in part because I had myself modified with a little of their DNA in my brain where the telepathic center lies so that I could pick up their concepts when they sent them to me. This is not hearing voices. This is not something sent in English. I put English around the concept. But one of the first things they came across with was, well, the return of Nibiru going to cause a pole shift on Earth, along with all the other yaddy yaddy on Zeta Talk about spiritual transformation, what many people call Armageddon or the end times, the day of judgment. The earth will become a home for the meek, the transformation of the earth, a new hybrid race between Zetas and humans ongoing, which is why women report, I was taken into a spaceship and then the baby was partly mine, and blah blah. And so we're going to have mankind's next leap forward in that regard. But the biggie central was, get ready for the pole shift. It's going to take out 90% of mankind's population, cause these huge tidal waves, climate change for every part of Earth because the crust shifts, it separates from the core of the Earth. And why does this happen? Because Nibiru is 4 to 5 times larger than Earth, 23 times more massive. It is a magnet, a planetary magnet, as is Earth. You cannot put the North Pole of 2 magnets together. It just won't happen. And
Right.
therefore the bully magnet pushes the Earth aside. And when it does that, it does it so violently that the crust separates from the core and slides. And then and that's why in the past we've had ice ages, wandering poles, and that type of thing. So right now we're
Oh,
in a daily wobble, and Nibiru is approaching us from the sun. From that, it's closer to the sun than we are. It's closer to the sun than Venus in its orbit, and coming outbound, and causing all kinds of havoc with weather, storms, drought and deluge cycles. And we have a wobble where, in fact, you don't see the sun rising and setting where it ought to be if you're paying attention and measure.
yeah.
It's skewed because the North Pole is taking like a figure eight. Well, the Inuit Indians will tell you that. They will tell you, that the constellations were never there where they are now. That the sun, it stays too bright too long, and that things are, and they know because they guide themselves by the stars, and they
Oh,
are up there in the dark, in the long winter with nothing else to look at except when is it light and when is it not. And so
oh,
and this has been in the news for 3, 4, 5 years. Well, I
yeah.
recently got an email from Sweden of a woman showing me a webcam image and said, this cam is pointed north. It was taken at 1 o'clock. Look how bright it is outside. Well, their sunset rise was supposed to be at 4:09. Civil twilight doesn't happen until an hour before sunrise. This was at 1 o'clock, 3 hours earlier. I verified that with people in Denmark because this was southern Sweden. And yes, 1:30, 2 o'clock, way too bright. So this is the type of thing that people are being exposed to around the world. Nothing in the media, nothing admitted. You go to talk to observatories or astronomers who are terrified of being killed, as a great number of them have been. Don't talk about this. Don't panic the people. And all you get is brushed aside and ridiculed. Well, back in 1995 when I started Zeta Talk, it was just, here's what's coming. And they gave, my Zetas did, specific coordinates in the sky in the direction of Orion, where to look for it as it comes in. And this was, and it came in 2003. As I said, at almost exactly on the spot where I said it would arrive in 1995, or 1997, in other words, years earlier. So people tracked that in 2001, 2, and 3. In 2001, they went to observatories with these coordinates, and sure enough, these observatories were France and a couple of places in the US. I think one of them was Vancouver in Canada. And then in 2002, because Orion is only really visible in the winter in the winter months in the night sky. So they went looking in infrared. A skeptic did that in Florida and said, "Okay, Nancy, where is it?" And I put my finger on the image, or put my X, and son of a gun, there was an object there that wasn't on the star charts. Someone, a student in France, also got his hands on infrared equipment, likewise found it, and then again, in the U.S. at an observatory. So in winter of 2002 to 2003, it was getting close, and they went out with CCD images, rented a scope in Arizona, and every 2 weeks we were taking these FITS files and paying money for it and identifying that it was tracking along according to the zeta coordinates, leaving the spot where it was, arriving at the new spot, and this was not on the star charts, so therefore it was a new object. Well, nothing but ridicule, from the astronomers who are trying to say nobody but they knew what they were doing. In other words, you're just an idiot out there bumbling around. Well, now today, 20 years later, guess what? You can see it daily on a webcam in Italy. This was discovered by someone in Germany who, usually pores over the SOHO images. SOHO, for those who don't know, is a satellite that rides between the Earth and Sun. There's a name for it, but basically it floats there and doesn't rotate with the Earth, and it stays in that position and moves with the Earth round and round. So, and it takes images of the sun and what's around the sun. And this bugger shows up along with its wafting tail and all the debris and moons in its tail. And even though NASA clearly is trying to airbrush it out, we've got so much evidence of that, those programs don't always work and something slips through now and then. So this particular person was watching a webcam in Italy right around 1800, 5, 6 o'clock. There it is, around the 4 o'clock position to the sun, which is where people in the northern hemisphere can find it. And that guy is showing up daily, showing its double helix, and it's visible, more so than Venus would be, because Venus is a star shape, the morning or evening star. Now, why did the government go out in 1983?
Nancy, is this something that they're putting on their website, or
I have it on my website in my newsletters, but there's a poleshiftning.com blog, poleshift, poleshift.ning.com, and has a regular blog, Nibiru Captured Daily, that you can go look. And it's just stunning. When it came in 2003, and it was in the night sky, amateur astronomers were watching for this and began to take pictures of it. I myself saw it. I came home from work, a work meeting at 8 o'clock, and I knew it was supposed to be coming visible, and I stood out in a cornfield, and there it was, this smeary red complex, not any of the known stars, etc. People were taking pictures of it. You could see a double helix kind of curling off on either side and swirling behind it. And sure enough, the ancient Sumerians or Babylonians pictured Nibiru with wings on either side. And in 2009, we even got that particular winged globe briefly appearing in a SOHO image. They mucked up, in their airbrush, and there it was. So there's beaucoup evidence that it exists, and it's closer to us now than ever. And if you didn't need that already, from the wild weather, increase in earthquakes, increase in volcanism, well, the earthquakes are being dumbed down. They are, this whole past 10 years, we've been watching that. First, they started stripping out earthquakes so that the numbers didn't accumulate. If it was out in the ocean, if it was in a remotely populated area, zip, just pull it off the database. People would see this happen in front of their eyes.
I watched the film on that. The lady was talking about earthquakes that have been erased. The chart was reading along, and all of a sudden, poof, information disappeared, and it picked up someplace else.
Yeah. And then dumb them down. Now, we used to have the Richter system. I'm not sure if they're trying to say, well, we changed that now, it's some other name. But the bottom line was, earthquakes are measured not only in the force of the jolt, but also the wide scope they affect. If you have a little bitty earthquake in the middle of Kansas and nobody outside of Kansas feels it, that's not a biggie. But if you feel it coast to coast and they say, oh, it was only a 3, then they're lying. Because scope is part of
Yeah.
the measure. So when you take a look at these earthquakes, how much damage there's supposed to be, how many buildings fall down, how far square miles did it affect, you can see that they're calling it a full magnitude lower than it should be, and now lately it's full almost 2 magnitudes below where it should be. So if they say it's a 7, it was likely a 9. I mean that's pretty close to where we're going.
Right.
And hush, no talk about fireballs. This tail, Nibiru has a very debris-ridden tail, and the ancients, when they described the passage, such as happened during the Jewish Exodus 1600 years before Christ, and was also recorded in the Kolbrin, which is Egyptian records, peppered with hail. Actually, people all over the world have legends of that. The hail is so thick. Every tree was cut down. Every the crops were destroyed. Blah blah blah. And the fireballs would come through. At first, 10 years ago, they were saying, "Oh, that's space junk. Space junk has been falling down." After a while, that didn't even fly because people were finding pieces of what looked like meteors where the space junk was supposed to have hit ground.
Right.
And then they tried to line it up with meteor showers, but they didn't line up very well. And so now they just ripped it out of the news. If you got fireballs screaming across several provinces of Canada, you won't hear about it in New Zealand. They try to
Right.
keep it out of the news and minimize it.
Yeah.
Volcanic eruptions on the increase, inactive volcanoes erupting, without. So let me think what else is going on. Even
On that subject, sometimes people witness something. For example, one evening, for whatever reason, I was standing in my driveway out here in Cami, Idaho. Of course, we're sitting up on top of a mountain, and all of a sudden, this thing started coming down through the sky, and it was like glowing green, and it got brighter and brighter. Now, my friend who I was talking to, Jim, had his back to this situation. I'm looking at it, and I don't know how far away. It wasn't really that close, but it was certainly you could certainly see it. Well, at one point, it got so bright that you could see the reflection on the buildings. The buildings here
Yeah.
where I live, and he started to notice how bright it was getting. And I said, "Look at that!" And he turned around, and he caught the last part of it as it, and from what I heard later on, there was no reports like you're saying.
Right.
Um, there was a little something that something had came down in Canada. Well, I was thinking about the angle and how high it was, and I mean that thing was moving. Surely it landed in Canada somewhere, but then it just disappeared. There was no more information on it
Right. That's recent.
whatsoever. Now, whether it disintegrated before it got to the ground or what happened, and and another thing I want to point out here too. I want to back up here just for a second is I've been involved in conversations here lately. When you build a house, your house doesn't move around.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
And every morning when you roll out of bed, the sunshine comes in, and all of a sudden here, the conversations have been here lately as, wow, we're getting sunlight in rooms we never get sunlight in.
That's right. That's right.
Something's different,
That's right.
and there's only one thing that could be different. Obviously, something has shifted.
Yes, yes, this regular wobble, which is figure 8, and I established that in 2004 because after coming into the inner solar system in 2003 on schedule and where I said it would, it began to push and pull the globe because we have a North Pole and it comes up over the horizon, and when it does, the North Pole of this guy, which is pointed outward, toward us, gives our North Pole a shove, and then later it kind of wobbles back. The bottom line is the North Pole is forming a figure 8, and people have noticed what you are describing. Also, the Moon and Venus react because this bugger
Right.
is a big gravity force as well as magnetic. And the moon is supposed to be pretty close along the ecliptic, but about 5 degrees off are the ecliptic. That's the moon. And you can compute how much the face should rotate during the night if you or during a 12-hour period when the moon might be visible to you. Well, it's more like 90 degrees instead of 5 degrees. And people have documented and commented on this as far back as 2004, 5, and 6. And it absolutely is a more tilted orbit. Like if the hat on your head should be ear top to ear top, it is earlobe to way up there. You know,
Right.
an extreme tilt.
But
And you can document
another
this.
noticeable thing is, my bed, for example, in the bedroom has always been located in the same spot. And when you lay down at night, you have a tendency just to, look out the window, what have you. And in recent times here, usually when we have full moons or something like that, you can see how bright it is outside, but through the window, laying on my bed, you couldn't see the moon.
Right.
Now you can.
Yeah, yeah, and that was one of the things that we were picking up comments from people saying, Grandma's lived here. She's 86. She lived here all her life. She says the moon never shone in that window, and what's it doing out there? So these kind of observations, which of course, if you deliver them to NASA, they say, "Oh, stupid woman, she's senile."
Yeah,
They have a lot
your
of
house is
insight.
raised up 5 feet or something.
You
So
think
it's
that
a long excuse.
this this information hasn't been a threat to the cover up. I have that on my website that NASA only found necessary to mention when they would give these hangouts or interviews. They would say, "Don't listen to Nancy Leader." Now, I don't know of anyone they've ever said that about except me. And they've done it repeatedly. And I have this documented in my website. You can go and take a look at the newsletters where this is featured. So I wear that as a badge of pride, because it means that I'm touching a nerve for sure. Now,
Right,
why don't,
exactly. Well, you see, the thing is, it's same thing for the Patriot movement, all the predictions that were made, things that we talked about 10, 15, 20 years ago. Folks, this is coming, they didn't really get it, and now here we are, it's here. And you're experiencing the same thing, the voice in the desert or something, and then all of a sudden it's here. And there's no way you can deny some of the things that are taking place right here on the planet, never mind out in space. And that's not an area that people pay a lot of attention to, is out in space, but they don't realize the effect it's going to have on what's here. So I have to say that, I appreciate the information you brought in the past. I appreciate the information you bring to us now. And if things are starting to show up, you mentioned the individual in what was it, Italy,
yeah,
that's taking daily pictures of the Planet X coming into view. You'd have to ask, why do people continue to ignore it if they don't think it's going to amount to nothing? But then turn around and look at some of the things that the government are doing. Now, I'm just going to share this with you because it's the only thing that makes sense to me, other than trying to kill a population, is all this overcast. I remember, I don't know, a year or two ago, man, it just seemed like it was going to rain every day. It was always overcast, but nothing ever happened. And they kept spraying their chemtrails and what have you. But what I got out of all of that was the fact that I couldn't see out into space. I couldn't see the stars. There was always overcast.
yes.
And if I wanted to keep somebody from seeing something, well, I'd just put a blanket over the earth, and then they wouldn't be able to see anything. They wouldn't be able to verify anything. And I was
That makes
wondering
perfect
if you
sense.
had any comment on
Yeah.
along the lines of what I'm speaking of,
Oh, yes.
because I run on common sense, and that's what I got out of it.
Oh yeah. People complain all the time and tell me where it's heavy and what's going on and so fogged up. And and the Zetas have commented about that from the start. They said, but this started over 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And its original intention was to sicken migrants. And we're talking about the very elite know that Nibiru is coming by and that there will be cataclysmic changes on Earth. And they have their enclaves, like they don't want the bloods.
That's why we're looking at. That's why we would be looking at underground facilities being built.
Yes,
Trillions of
yes,
dollars.
yes, yes. And the wealthy elite forming enclaves, and they expect to have a militias or the Department of Defense is going to protect them. And so what the idea was that when the Bloods and the Crips in LA start to, wander up toward Utah, where the Mormons are told to keep a year's worth of food for your family and just live off the silly Mormons, they're going to spray them and make them sick, and they won't be able to march so readily or fight. So it was originally, and this early spraying did that. It filled up the clinics. Everybody came in sick with sore throat, flus, or whatever, and they were just really down. So the way the Zetas put it, the Department of Defense was supposed to be involved in this, and they refused. They said this is not right. And because also killing people that would approach the elite enclaves, the ultra right in Utah or whomever, where, Dick Cheney's kingdom in Wyoming. So they said this is not right. We won't participate with this. So the wealthy took it on themselves, and I think they were also pressured. You can fog up the sky, but you can't sicken people, because that's where we're at now, just fogging up the sky.
Right.
But it doesn't really work. There's too much evidence of this guy. The magnetosphere, is absolutely showing something, not the sun. The sunspot activity is practically zero, and it doesn't correlate with when we get these electromagnetic blasts. The trains, the electric trains, the airplanes, they go completely electronic dead. Air France 447, they finally blamed it on weather and an incompetent pilot. But the
Back down here at the bottom of the hour, you're listening to me, Joe McNeil, here on Who's Next on the Micro Effect Radio Broadcast Network. And we're talking with Nancy Lueder. Like I'm saying, folks, there are things out there people aren't paying any attention to. It's like nobody who would recognize a tsunami, and they're standing there looking at one. They have no idea that their life is about to come to an end, and they stand there in total amazement and watch as it approaches. And, I'm sure that if you talk to some of the tsunami victims that we've seen here in recent times, they would tell you, yeah, well, if I'd known what it was, I would have been running. And there's things that we just need to be aware of. You don't have to be a believer or worship anything. You just need to be aware of. And that way, when it's coming in your direction, at least you would be wise enough, I think I heard something about this, and it'd probably be a good idea if I climb up there 200 feet and sit on that rock and watch what takes place. Anyway, getting back to you, Nancy, we were going to talk also a little bit. I did want to point out that there are. Phil Snyder came out talking a few years back before he passed on about government projects that he'd been working on and underground facilities. And some of the curious things that come to mind is all the apparatuses, alphabet soups, things that are moving off the East Coast into Colorado.
Yeah.
That they're not really necessarily talking about that either.
Right.
And that the facilities that are already been built there, whether it's NORAD or the Denver airport, for example, would be another. There's things that they're doing quietly in the background. It doesn't make the news. It doesn't come on the news and say, "Oh, look at this wonderful facility that we built underneath the airport. It's going to serve this purpose or that purpose, or anything else for that matter." It's all done very quietly. So just looking at some of the things that we know that are taking place, you can sit there and ask the question why, but you don't have to. You don't have to, because when you're talking about catastrophic events, whether it's a shifting of the earth or being collided with another planet, whatever it would come to, uh, obviously somebody believes enough to invest billions of dollars in some sort of safe haven they think that will get them through the up and coming event. Don't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And for those noticing that an awful lot of effort has been made. We're going to get to Mars, and it's always by people like Elon Musk of SpaceX or Sir Richard Branson, and these billionaires. They're so intent on, throwing they must get to Mars, and the reason for that is that they think that if they can, that all these horrible earthquakes and tsunami and raging wildfires and volcanic and dust and blah, and after it all settles down, they'll come back and they'll emerge as kings. This
They'll
is
be
what's
kings of
driving
the
them.
earth, huh?
Yeah, because they know the pole shift is going to come, and they want to be away, far at least not on the surface of Earth. Even being on the moon is because that tail full of debris just rakes everything. So, good news for the common man is all those underground bunkers, they're not going to be livable, because the first thing that happens if you have magnitude 9 quakes everywhere, in plates shifting and grinding against each other and smacking and whacking, is, can you imagine an escalator or elevator, and whoa, it just doesn't rise up the way it should, and the air ventilation system isn't working. They're going to drown, they're going to suffocate, and then there's these militias, well, okay, but I have a castle, and I've hired this militia with all my money and jewels and gold. Well, guess what? Why should that militia pay attention to you and consider you to be the boss when there is no police force, there's no courts? They can do anything to their masters. They're going to raid the liquor, eat all the food, and make the guy who thought he was in charge clean the toilets. And why should they not? The wealthy and those in power cannot retain what they have today. Who's going to come out on top? The lower class, the middle class, the hardworking people that have got calluses on their hands and they're used to it. Why? Because they know today they don't have anything, so everything gets wiped out, and they say, "Well, I'm no different than yesterday." They know how to, they'll garden, they'll raise chickens and goats, they'll whack up a shelter out of the trash blown around, and make merry in the evenings with homebrew. So they're going to actually do better than the wealthy classes, and people should bear that in mind.
Well, Nancy, I remember you having something on your website there for safety zones. Safety zones,
Safe
a good place to
locations. Yeah.
be
Yep.
during these
Yeah.
times. Do you still have that? I
I
haven't
do.
been
Yeah.
there lately.
Left-hand side, narrow menu bar. I had to make it narrow because we had to get ready for the iPhones and the iPads. So the website got kind of scrunched weird. But on the left-hand side, it says Safe Lokes. Click on that, and Zeta Advice, among other links. And they have given their best for various states, countries, coastal areas, whatever. And it was really, they know what's coming, and I mean, these guys are not dummies. Their IQ is phew, so they to be taken seriously. Yes. So
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, while we're still clicking things off, the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse, airplanes going down. Oh, the pilot is at fault. No, electromagnetic pulse takes everything out, then they have no oxygen, then it's a ghost plane like Malaysia 370, flying by what's left of the autopilot on whatever computer didn't get totally wonked. Air France 447, the German wings into the Alps, it's always blank. Fortunately, on the Philly train wreck, where it suddenly sped up, it was supposed to be 50 and it was 106, that pilot, that conductor, is so impeccable, they don't feel that they can charge him with being drunk or on his phone or something. That was
Right.
Pulse. And also the DC blackout that we had a couple months ago, I was pleased to see, on a bit of honesty, in that the media reported that as a surge rather than as an outage. Because a surge, if you have in the power outage, if you look at the maps, it looked like a case of measles. It wasn't along the grid lines at all. It was spotty. And also, if you have an outage, that means that all of a sudden there's less electricity, not a surge anywhere. A surge, and so they're starting to, and I think it was Ontario used the word surge also recently. A little honesty in what they're reporting. So
Right.
get on that electric train, get on that airplane. Remember, it can happen. You're better off in your car these days. Now, are we ever going to have a break in the cover-up? Well, Obama's been trying that since the summer of 2012. He decided that he was going to let the people know. He conferred with Russia and China, and they agreed to be partners, and they said, look, we gotta start getting our people willing to move away from the coast, set up in rural areas. I mean, 80% of the U.S. population lives in cities, and most of those are river bottoms or coastal areas. They're going to be devastated by earthquakes or big tides.
Right.
Russia, because of the rise in sea level that will happen as a result of heat from friction from the crustal shift, is got to move everybody around the Moscow, etc., their eastern half, shift everybody to their far east, where they're going to have a lovely high ground and a very temperate. The new equator is going to go through the Bering Straits. So that's what they've got to do. That's a lot to accomplish. China too. India is going to be the new South Pole. So now everybody gathered around Tibet where they grow rice and all that. They got to shift up more toward
Right.
Mongolia, toward northern China, and they're prepared to do that. They have built ghost cities there that have been there for almost 10 years.
Yeah, I was reading about that in recent times. Just a whole city sitting there and nobody's there.
Nobody's there, and they're getting ready to transfer their southern population to the north. So
Right.
and Russia, in fact, has issued the president Medvedev or whatever his name is. He said state offices will move to the Far East from the Moscow-Ural area. Well, no reason was given, just we're shifting. This was 2 years ago already. These
Yeah.
guys take Theta Talk seriously, what the predictions are, and so does Obama. He
Yeah.
doesn't come out and say, but he has tweaked with executive orders such that federal agencies can get involved in moving people into the country, and I'm sure confiscating idle farmland is part of that. If you're on the land bank or whatever they call that, and you get paid to leave your land idle, whoops, now that's not your land anymore. That type of thing. And they'll set up people from Memphis, Tennessee after the new Madrid or that type of, scenario. Here's the
Right.
lumber, here's the seed, here's the goats and the little baby chicks. Feed yourselves. That's what's going to happen. And
We have a caller, Nancy. We have time to take a caller?
sure.
Okay, we have Bill in Texas there. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Joe. Just having my lunch. There's a book I read a while back. It was called Pole Shift, and it was about all the scientific evidence looking at the lava flows, how the magnetic poles has shifted numerous times, and the guy that did the research, or at least collected a lot of the data, one of the things he talked about was that all those frozen mastodons up north
Yeah,
had summer vegetation in their stomach.
right.
So whatever happened during that pole shift, it went from summer to below freezing fast enough to prevent the stuff from rotting inside the guts of the mastodon.
Yeah, I remember reading
And he
about
was
that.
talking about how we're way overdue
Yeah,
for the semi-regular cycle of pole shift.
right.
Right.
It's a neat book, and I just thought I would throw that out there. And
Yeah, this is exactly true. We have geological evidence, but this is extinction evidence that the last mammoths died out around 3,800 years ago on Wrangel Island, now way up in the polar circle. And how did they ever live? I mean, these are elephants essentially. They eat huge amounts of vegetation, and they're it's like some of this coincides with the ice age in France, where Siberia was a lush grassland. Well, what did the sun do? Blink out, over France and then blink back on over Siberia? That it obviously the crust shifted. Potsdam University found that Greenland shifted from the top of the Arctic down, which is why it's so ice heavy. It's one of our big ice reserves. And they also computed that the Sahara became more of a desert because of that shift, which I think they computed was about 20, 23 degrees or something. So people have looked at this evidence, and it's just rift. all over the 3,500, 3,700 years ago. The oceans of the world on beaches all around the world dropped 16 to 20 feet. Velikovsky recorded this. The studies done by various scientists. And what about the Jewish Exodus itself, where Terra, Terra, was a big volcano in near Greece, blew up huge. I mean, thousands of times more heavy than Krakatoa, which was the biggie in our memory, and it's now called Santorini or something, big hole over there. Anyway, guess when that happened? The best estimate, 1628 before Christ. Well, that's about 3,600 years ago, and that's the cycle of this planet. It's not precise. A lot can happen on a long journey. It's not precise to the year or the minute, but it's approximately 3,600 year swing through our solar system. Yep.
Anything else, Bill?
Yeah. Just as in that book, he talked about how some of the cycles took, years for it to switch from north to south pole, but in some of the magnetic samplings of the lava cores they used, it happened very quickly.
Yeah.
We're talking a short period of time, days, weeks, or even just a few months.
Right.
On a geological scale, it was just practically instant.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's all I got. And thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you for your call, Bill.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
mountain.
that's the other thing that's come into our culture. When you're explaining these kind of things to people, what's going to be taking place, they expect it to be like a movie, and it'll all come and pass, just before you go to lunch. These are major events, my friends. It takes a while. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nancy.
The Zetas have outlined the last weeks, which is about a 2-month period, and of course the legend talks about 3 days of darkness and the plagues and blah blah blah. And so if you want to read anything in Zeta Talk, be sure to read that article called Last Weeks, because it details the time, and it's when you absolutely should not be on the coast. You should be 5 to 6 feet high or well inland, blah blah blah, and plan on being, laying outside in a shallow trench so you don't get blown away, but you don't have a building fall on you. So Obama wanted to tell people, middle of 2012, set out to do that, had his partners lined up, tried to make an emergency broadcast, and we couldn't get through. He was cut off at the pass. Then he planned on an Oval Office announcement. Whoops, couldn't get that through either. So there's been this huge behind-the-scene battle going on, and it's well documented in Zeta Talk, where he gets to say to people, look, it's true. Ronald Reagan put out executive orders saying in 1983, when they found it out there in the infrared balloon, and they said, it hit the front page of the Washington Post at that time, mystery object out in the direction of Orion. We don't know if it's part of our solar system or if it's inbound or what, but we found it. And then they said, never mind, we miscalculated. It was a math error. We didn't find anything. And the cover-up began. He decided that nobody should know about aliens and nobody should know about Nibiru because the public couldn't handle it. Well, actually, it has an awful lot with keeping the pecking order in place with the wealthy and politically powerful on top of the pile, so that they can control people and run us around like sheep. So Obama has countered those executive orders, but everybody is waiting for his official statement in that regard, because anything less than that, is going to be poo-pooed. Oh, just a hoax, just a rumor, and people getting assassinated. And if he comes out without others behind him, the backing of NASA and Russia and China and other weighty powers, they're going to say, he's flipped his wig, he's gone crazy. We told you he's losing it, or it's a joke. So it's a difficult thing, but he is wanting to do that and been trying to do that. And the Zetas tell me that's 99% certain to happen.
Wow.
So what do you think is going to happen when that happens? Chaos.
Chaos, exactly. Panic, I would
And
suppose.
what do you think Jade Helm 15 is all about?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to throw that on the table here real quickly. it's kind of a curious thing. I was looking at some of the maps that Phil Snyder had, showing where all these underground facilities and stuff was. And curiously enough, it's right in the area where Jade Helm is occupying now.
Oh,
The larger amount of, there's a dot over here and a dot over there, but the bulk of it all is in the areas that Jade Helm is supposed to be operating right now, which I find to be very curious.
well, the Zetas were, of course, asked about that because it also rings along where we have migration problems along the Mexico border, California, Texas, Arizona, etc., and it sloughs toward Florida also. It goes through like Louisiana and over to Florida. Well, make
Right.
this a combination of migration problems, but also earth changes. We are heading for a New Madrid adjustment. This is something that Zetas detail extensively in my Zeta Talk website. So there are ways to measure how close we are. The North American continent is being squeezed like a bow with the Aleutian Islands and the tip of Mexico pulled toward each other. And this has caused, for instance, in the Four Corners area, I think this was within the last 6 months, I got a question, why is this a hotspot, a methane hotspot right there at the Four Corners? There's nothing there. And the Zeta said, squeezed rock, where you've had continental overrides, that type of thing from subduction, you get a lot of vegetation squeezed between rock layers, and when it's squeezed in a bow, there's cracks, the methane rises, and that's what they're sensing. So the U.S. government is aware in a lot of different ways just what's going on in swarms in Oklahoma, for instance, that type of thing. They think it's getting very close to ripping, and the Zetas have said before the end of 2015 it will start. And start means magnitude 7s and 8s, not necessarily the big one, but starting. So now you have all these brick cities up and down the Mississippi. Memphis isn't the only one, all the way up to Chicago and wrap around under the seaway through Ohio, on even up into along the East Coast, because there's a sister fault line, the East Coast fault line, I think it's called, which rang bells in Boston the last time the New Madrid went. So now we have all these brick buildings and mortar crashing, all these homeless people, right? And just look at our oil and gas distribution lines that cross the Mississippi that will be torn by this kind of maneuver. No distribution to the East Coast, no gas and oil. It's a disaster, to speak lightly. The
Well, see,
Walmart,
we're getting very close to the top here. Before we do that, I want you to give out your information for
yes,
your
yes,
blog spot and everything that you have, so people
yes,
can find
yes.
out where you have all this information
My,
and maybe get on your mailing list.
yeah, I don't have a mailing list anymore. It was too hard to meet, too many people. Zetatalk, ZETATALK.com. I have mirror sites all over the world, 15 of them. Poleshift.ning.com. Don't forget the Walmart closures. The 5, we're right around the lower New Madrid area, which is the first place it's going to give. It's in the soft rock. It's related to the New Madrid happening. It's related to crustal shift, sending a lot of migrants over the border. That's Jade Helm 15 and the Walmart closures.
Wow, so you're saying you're going to be like facilities for
Yeah,
uh,
distributing
I haven't heard that yet.
tents and medical equipment and that type of thing. It's not plumbing. Walmart closures were not plumbing.
Yeah, the broken water pipe syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah, they were in Florida and Texas. I think one of them was in California, but they are anticipating that already, because South America is shifting the top part west, the Caribbean is being pushed down. We've had a whole bunch of little earthquakes. I just captured that. Red circles all up and down Central America, and whoa, Jamaica has got seawater coming because it's going. This is all Zeta Talk prediction, the 7 of 10 prediction plate movements. And
Right.
so they know that when this kind of catastrophe happens, we're going to have drowning people from the Caribbean and coming up through Central America, through Mexico, and Jade Helm was supposed to block that. And also a little bit of a worry about maybe former Governor Perry in Texas is going to secede Texas. They're already trying to get their own gold. Shaney in Wyoming and ex-Governor Perry in Texas, we're no longer part of the Union. That's another headache for Obama to deal with.
Well, Nancy, I got to say, this is the fastest hour I've ever done. We still have so much. Well, we're going to have you back. I hope you will agree to that.
Yes,
sometime in the near future, because and people, you need to go to zetatalk.com. Like I said, start looking at things that aren't necessarily tyranny related. There's other things going on as well. And Nancy, I want to thank you very much for coming on with me here today. And it's been a real pleasure. And I, man, we got to have you back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back.
And so we're going to slide on out of here, and I'll talk to you, if not later on today, maybe tomorrow. And we'll set up, because folks, all this information that Nancy's bringing to the table, like I said, everybody's looking in their local neighborhoods, but they're not watching the skies.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that's something we need to be doing.
Yeah, good for you.
And one more time, Nancy, give out your information.
Yeah, Zeta Talk, ZETATALK.com. And
Okay.
the other is poleshiftning, poleshift.ning.com.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy, and have a good afternoon.
You betcha. Same
And
to you.
folks, we're going to be sliding out of here for today. We're going to be doing more of these programs, so we want you to stay tuned to the Micro Effect. I'm Joe McNeil here on my program, Who's Next?